Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, we're going to learn how to knock out stress from a man who taught that for 25 years. That's next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've
watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, let's face it, stress has been a problem for generations, but it became increasingly worse during the pandemic. In fact, I would argue that most Americans have undiagnosed PTSD. We were all traumatized to a certain extent. To talk about that today, Chris Harris, he is an author, speaker. Motivational Pros is the name of his company. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Now, we were talking before the show about just how bad it's gotten, and it was bad before the pandemic, wasn't it?
It was bad. There's some new statistics that came out recently. We're not in a post-pandemic season yet, but we are in an emerging post-pandemic. So we're heading that direction. And to where prior to the pandemic, 1 out of 10 people were diagnosed with depressive or anxiety disorders. That number's now risen to 4 out of 10.
That's crazy. I mean, pretty much everybody is kind of a walking trauma case.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you go into companies and you help companies deal with this, don't you?
Well, I teach about mindset, and definitely one of the mindsets that I teach is achieving and then maintaining a high level of mental fitness, mental toughness. And that goes hand in hand with obviously mental health. But, we have long periods of self-isolation. We have unemployment. We have recession on a global scale that, and some of this has been unprecedented for this generation. And so a lot of people are filled with uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, there's stress. And when there's stress, that affects mood, and then that affects health.
So we should tell the audience who you are and your background, because it's a very colorful background. We're going to put up on the screen your bio. You've taught hand-to-hand combat for 25 years. Just talk a little bit about your journey. It started when you were 10?
Yeah, when I was 10 years old, I was living in government housing. We called it the projects at the time, Section 8 housing. And most of the boys that lived in that community did not have fathers living with them. And so there was someone from the local church who was a martial arts expert, a black belt in karate, and he would come every Saturday to our rec center, and he would teach martial arts for free, sort of an outreach to the community. And I fell in love with martial arts at 10 years old, never stopped doing it. And then in 1993, I created my own system of martial arts called Roku Jitsu, which I created specifically for teaching federal agencies, military, special forces, law enforcement. And that's what I taught for 25 years.
And so much of what you were teaching wasn't just the physical, it was the mental, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're training elite warriors. I mean, when we think of elite warriors, they're known for their elite mindset, right? Never give up. They've already won before they've stepped onto the battlefield mentally. And about 70% of what I would teach was the physical portion of close quarters combat. The other 30%, I taught something which I called 6 mindsets.
And that's a new book that you have coming out in the fall.
Yes, 6 Mindsets for Success is going to be released in October.
And you're a prolific writer. I wrote one book and it almost killed me. We're going to put on the screen a number of books that you've written. How many books have you written now?
The book that I'm working on right now, 6 Mindsets for Success, that will be number 7.
That's amazing. And we've got one of them right here. I Go Through. Tell us about this book.
So I Go Through is a collection of 50 short stories about me overcoming adversity in my life. Everything from a tumultuous childhood to some things during my adult years. But the book has one common theme, and that is one of the most powerful, well, let's just say 2 of the most powerful assets that we have in our life is, one is the ability to choose our perspective. We can't control our circumstances, but we can choose our perspective. And then the second takeaway from this book is we have the ability to let things go. And that's what this book is about. It's 50 stories, short stories of me having been faced with an opportunity to either hold on or let go, or choose the wrong perspective or choose the best perspective. And I don't always do it right in this book, but I share those stories too.
And Chris is an amazing speaker. I urge you to consider bringing him into your company to have him motivate your troops. But let's go ahead and roll a clip now.
What happens when you walk into an environment and there's 6 bad guys and just you? Those are overwhelming odds. What do? It's real simple. There's never more than 2. No, I just said there's 6. Well, no, there may be 6 bodies in front of me, but there's only 2 threats. There's never more than 2 threats, and there should be never more than 2 things that are stressing you out. As soon as you're surrounded in combatives by 6 threats, the very first thing you do is you do a visual scan of the environment or of the room, and you determine who's my primary and who's my secondary. Whether it be 6 or 60, there's 2, a primary and a secondary. Now, as soon as you deal with eliminating the primary threat, guess what happens to the secondary? They become primary. And now, with a very quick visual scan, we determine who's the new secondary. So there may be 6 in the room, but there's never more than 2 things stressing you out. And all of a sudden, I've got this much to do, and I've got this much time to do it. All of a sudden, it becomes this. I've got this much to do. This much. That's it. If you take that principle and you apply it to your workday, your stress levels will do this. Now, it takes some self-discipline and it takes laser-like focus. Because all of a sudden, someone's going to put something on your plate and it's going to be 10 things, not 2. This is where your discipline and laser-like focus come in, because you go through it, you do a visual scan, you go, all right, what are the 2 most pressing? That's my primary and secondary. Yeah, but what about the other 8? No, I never deal with more than 2 threats. I'll eliminate them one at a time. And once I eliminate my primary, my secondary will move to primary, and I will find a new secondary. That's the way I live my life. And as a result, I don't live under a lot of stress.
Chris, I think that's profound, because I think all of us get overwhelmed. I mean, you have a to-do list, and the to-do list gets longer every day, and it can become overwhelming if you're concentrating on everything that you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The principle of primary and secondary I've been teaching now for over 25 years, and it's amazing how this military or combatives principle translates well into time management. So if someone walks into a room and they're faced with overwhelming odds, let's just say 10 bad guys versus 1 good guy, there's never 10 bad guys. There's just 2. There's a primary threat and a secondary threat. And once I look at the room that way, it's not about how many there are. There's always 2. There's never more than 2. Then I can easily dismantle and neutralize these threats. And now once I've dealt with the primary, the secondary becomes the new primary, and I find a new secondary. And this is a great way for time blocking and time management. If you've got a busy day and you've got 20 things to do and you don't know how you're going to get them all done, just tell me the primary and secondary, and we can go from there.
I love it. And you really captivate your audiences. There's a testimonial video. Let's go ahead and play some of that now.
First and foremost, something that really resonated with me, and I actually just mentioned that to Chris when he signed my book. He put a statement up there about momentum, and it really resonated with me because I did have some pretty great success in the past year, and I actually had folks that reached out to me. It was like, why aren't you taking some time? You're coming into the office early, you're still doing these activities where you could potentially take the rest of the year off. And I think why it really stuck with me is because once you get that momentum going, you have to keep it going. You lose that, and 6 months down the line, you're back to 0. So keeping that going and keeping that momentum, I think, is incredibly important, both in sales and just any real profession. Yeah, it was very engaging, very personal story. I don't know what to say, but not exactly what I expected today. Him leading from, where he started in his childhood, up through his experiences, I think really would resonate with a lot of different folks. And, I think he makes the point, and it's very true, everyone's experienced some sort of adversity in their life, that can manifest itself in different ways, but being able to realistically and with focus approach those obstacles and that adversity is something that can be applied to any profession.
Sure. So I didn't have an initial perspective. I had never heard of Chris before. So when he came on stage, obviously he has a big presence and a big voice, and he really, I feel like, commanded the entire room. And so leaving today, I really liked his 4-step process, the best part. From start to finish of the sales cycle, I will implement that in some of the things I do here at Splunk. Well, clearly he's been through it all. From start to finish, he's very successful. And his ideas, I liked how he took, the 6 different stages of martial arts, stuck it into one thing, and it seems that maybe sales and martial arts aren't that different really after all.
Wow. Chris, one of the things that you talk about in your books is leveraging fear. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's different types of fear, and, we should be able to self-motivate ourselves. Mm-hmm. And fear is one of the easiest ways to do that. We have people who their dominant fear would be fear of loss, but we also have people who their dominant fear is their desire for gain is greater than their fear of loss, I should say. If you're a fear of loss person, which more people are motivated by fear of loss than they are desire for gain, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But if we have a fear of loss, we can use that as a force multiplier. We can use that as like a 10-foot lever to get us off center and to get us doing what we're supposed to do. So just to give you an example, if you're motivated or driven by fear of loss and you get a notice on the door that your home's going to be foreclosed on, all right, and you're, let's just say, in a sales career, you could leverage that and find a whole new gear, or you could let it cripple you and just sit there frozen. So one of the things that I teach is, fear offers motivation if we choose to accept it.
Yeah. Well, you could take the attitude that nobody's going to pay this light bill but me.
That's right.
So I got to get busy. Well, let me ask you about your own journey, because as a motivational speaker and you're teaching people how to use fear and leverage fear, middle of last year during the height of the pandemic, all of the speeches got canceled. Mm-hmm. Did you face fear yourself?
No, I faced concern.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big difference. There's fear, the jailer, right? Mm-hmm. Fear can jail us mentally, but there's also fear the counselor, right? And I chose to listen to fear the counselor, and that doesn't mean I wasn't concerned, because I was, right? But when you get wise counsel from a friend, and it's basically saying you need to turn left or turn right, we need to heed that advice, but we don't need to let it jail us, so to speak. So I was there was definitely a lot of fear around me. And, when you're in an environment that's surrounded by fear, it's very easy for us to take on some of that ourselves. And so I was trying to be the balance between the jailer and the counselor for a lot of my friends and family. And but I also realized that I had to make sure I kept myself in check, because that's a very easy road to go down when everyone around you is experiencing fear. But to answer your question, concern, yes, fear, no.
Okay, let's talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with positive people who feed your energy, because I know often there are people who, they may even have a loved one who's saying, no, you can't do that, or tearing them down. Why is it so important to have some cheerleaders around you?
Well, there's 6 pillars of maintaining a healthy level of mental fitness. And 2 of them are, you just mentioned, and one of them is controlling our environment, and the other one is controlling our relationships. Not controlling the relationship, but controlling the type of relationships we allow into our lives. And so it's very important, if we want to achieve and maintain a high level of mental fitness, that we are maintaining a high level of positive energy in both our environment and the relationships that we allow into our lives.
Chris, we've only got about a minute left. Your camera is there on the right. What do you want to say to the person who's watching at home saying, I completely agree with Chris. I see what he's doing, but my situation is dark. I got laid off, or they're dealing with something right now.
Well, the first thing I would say is, I have a heart filled with empathy for anyone who's been through, hardship, especially over the last 18 months. And I completely understand. I do. And there's a lot of people that are close to me who, have been faced with financial ruin. Chronic illness has been further, has been developed even further as the result of the mental state. They've lost their businesses. And so my heart goes out to you. I mean, what we've experienced over the last 18 months is real. But I would encourage you with this. You can make decisions, right? You can control your perspective. You can let things go. And you can find something new that motivates you and that gives you hope. And, one of the things that we must always balance, Jeff, if we want a high level of mental fitness, we must balance our current position with our future trajectory. And our current position, that's our hope, okay? And our future trajectory is our joy. And we need to find a balance between those two things. So find something that motivates you, get up and start running toward it.
Wow, I love it. We're going to have you back. You're very inspirational. Chris Harris is the author and speaker and sales coach, and he's the founder of Motivational Pros. We're going to put your website up so people can get in touch. Motivationalpros.com is the website. Chris Harris, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.